Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 64. Email questions. So, anything and everything pertaining to my email inbox inquiries having to do with the shop or with magic. First question: are you still doing wholesale incense for retail resale orders? Yes, the shop is still doing that. The prices have gone up across the board. No help for that. A lot of prices have gone up in shipping. And the U.S. Postal Service's prices themselves have gone up, along with a lot of the implements, items, packaging, and processes used to create the products themselves with coronavirus. Everything seems to have escalated just a little bit. So we do still do retail, resale, wholesale orders, large bulk orders. If you're interested, just direct message me and I'll let you in on the details. Why is LVX or Lux, this is the next question. Why is LVX or Lux from Rosicrucian and Hermetic Magic pronounced Luke or Lux? Is Lux the correct way to say it? Why isn't it Lux? Lux like it's spelled. So, yes, Lux or Lux energy is the correct pronunciation, even though it's spelled Lux, Lux, just as you said. Or an even older linguistic record, in formalized traditions, in most ancient mystery schools, you'll see this spelling, the ancient Latin, LVX. The true symbolism for the light. It's pronounced Lux because it's Latin, Latin for light. And quick tip, most every vowel in Latin when you speak it or read it aloud, because so many people speak dead languages, the vowels are spoken the way the letters themselves sound. So A isn't ah in spoken Latin, it's A. So Diane wouldn't be Diane, it would be Diane. E, for instance, isn't for E, like in the English word every, every. Instead, in Latin, that vowel, that E, is E, like in the word Felix, Latin for happy. In the same way, a U, like in the word lux, it isn't it isn't lux, like in the English word umbrage, which derives from the Middle English for shadowy outline or a shadow on the horizon. Instead, that U, instead of in Latin, that vowel is pronounced U in a majority of cases, like in the word mellifluous, Latin for flowing with honey. Mellifluous, not mellifluous. So in the same way, Lux, lux, is actually pronounced correctly in the Latin lux, because its origin is Latin. That's through the very anglicized Western conduit of traditions that brought that word to us and the way you're using it in your magical practices. That's why it's pronounced that way. It's from the Latin. That's how they talked. That is a really great question. Don't worry. If you get into magic, you'll pick up a lot of Latin by proxy. You'll pick up a lot of language and insights into spell casting and symbols as you traverse the great path. Every single word spoken, written, or read is, after all, a spell in one way or another. Everything you say is. Comprehension of that power and your own responsibility to it, and the way you communicate and interpret those communications, will start sneaking into your ability subset despite yourself. The longer you stand in the glow of the progenitors of the dialectic paradigms, the more that's going to rub off on you. It's a perk of magical training. Next question. Can you do magic without astrology? That's it. That's the entire question in the email. Can you do magic without astrology? I'm going to assume here that they're referring to astrology, what most people think of in horoscopes, rather than what real magic pertains to, which is recognitions of patterns into behaviors and energetic sourcing. So can you do magic without astrology, understanding of it, comprehension of it? Short answer, yes. You don't have to do any specific field of anything. interpretation of anything, research or practice into any specific belief system, religion, symbolic format in order to do magic. You don't even have to believe in any of them. You don't have to believe in astrology or any particular thing to do magic. That's not how high magic works. The truth is, we're all doing magic, whether we know it or not. How we go about it, the means we use to work with it, the formula or format we bring to the spiritual science, that is very much a reality. It can't be changed, it can't be stopped, it just is. What we bring to it is just how we interpret it individually, how we choose to go about working with it. It doesn't change the magic. The energies themselves are their existence and behaviors. It doesn't change that. Magic with a K on the end, M-A-G-I-C-K, it's in ceremonial and ritual magics, involves a set of actions, energetic provocations, if you will, techniques that always bring about a specified result. We'll always behave in a certain way. Belief isn't required for that to happen any more than belief is required for an atom to behave scientifically in a certain way. If you push a rock with the toe of your shoe, it moves forward. Magic is the same. You don't have to have belief or faith in the rock or in your shoe or even in the action you're taking itself. It will move, right? You don't have to have belief in that for it to behave that way on the manifested material plane, consistent with the universal laws encoded to those objects and operations. Magical energy is the same. If you do A plus B, it results in C within magic. Whether or not you believe in astrology or anything else or know anything about it, consistent to the universal laws, magic operates within the dominion of rules. And those rules will always manifest. So can you do magic without astrology or without necessarily believing in other things in order to do it? Yes. You don't have to be an advocate of ancient Egyptian lore. You don't have to be an advocate of astrology and planetary sphere patterns. You don't have to be an advocate of Kabbalah or belief in that system. Magic will still function. You can still do magic. You already are doing magic. It's unavoidable. It's as unavoidable as the sun's UV rays resulting in heat when the sun operates as it is in its existent form. Next question. Will I actually see blue light, circle, and sigils if I do the LBRP enough? Am I supposed to actually see things, be able to see the ritual lines in air or on ground, and not just imagine them? I had a very similar question to this on, I think it was YouTube in the subscribers messaging section recently, and I answered this question there if you want to read that answer. It was a very similar question about a week ago. The answer is yes. You can and should eventually see the energetic castings you project during your ceremonies. But I want to add an addendum of no to the second half of your question, that second half of that sentence. No, not necessarily just because you repeat the LBRP or any ritual or ceremony, quote unquote, enough. So will you actually be able to see things? Yes. But it's not just because you do the same ceremony over and over again enough. Yes, you can and should, will actually visually have in your sight the manifestation of your workings in real space-time. You'll see the energies. The blue spirit fire, the light of your circle, and pentagrams, later overlaying life-giving white sacred light of the unicursal hexagram. If you move on with your formalized training, actualized glow of source flooding down into your space and you yourself, through the interpretation of God forms and words, the blacks, greens, etc. that you've traced, say Taurus sigils during earth workings, that dark, that black as abyss, those symbols, or bright as fresh growing grass for the greens, hovering in the air right before your eyes, the humming hue tones of your own chakras. Yes, you can actually and will actually see all of those things, but only if you come into your magic, only if you do the work, the mental work, and actual spiritual and energetic labor to get there, to gain that ability. And it takes work. It takes daily energy every day, a ton of time. It takes caring about your craft to be able to see it. And that work, or working, if you will, it has everything to do with your personal enforced willpower, focus, and intention, and nothing to do with simply miming or aping movements by repetition over and over again. You could be doing the LBRP movements and words for millennia and never manifest anything if you're not actually putting yourself into it. You could do the LBRP ritual, for instance, as much as you want every day, twice a day for the rest of your life. If you're just mouthing the words and moving around fecklessly, nothing is ever going to happen. If you're pantomiming, because that's what that would be, a pantomime, instead of actively projecting your core deepest emotion and energetic intention, then you'll never even see a flicker of blue fire. It won't happen. However, if you do invest yourself and the effort to emotionally charge, energetically project causal creation into your circle of authority once cast, then yes, you will actually see things every time you undertake ceremonial workings. All the things mentioned and a great deal more. In fact, most neophytes, when they first pull the veil slightly aside, immediately freak out and trip over themselves. They lose control. When they actually have the sight slips away because it is so startling the first few times around for them to actually see blue fire, for instance, sparking off around themselves like some crazy fantasy, sci-fi or anime movie blazing up in your temple space. I once saw a Neo sitting on his bed, attempting yet again, very irate with himself for not being able to manifest the sight as he wanted it. And he tried again. He was sitting on the edge of his bed. And he did manifest his actual pentagrams in real time and was convinced that his bed was on fire for about 30 seconds while he jumped up terrified. And he had a milk jug, like one of those plastic milk jugs of water next to his bed, and he picked it up and threw it all over his own bedroom before the sight lapsed because he was in such a state of frenzy and confusion. Because that was the first time he'd actually seen blue spirit fire magic, that blue, flame up, and he wasn't prepared for how real it was when it happened. And it was actually his emotional state, his irritation that brought it about. I think it was the third or fourth time he tried that day before it happened. It snapped into place for him, and then he ended up throwing water all over his room unnecessarily. And no one's ever prepared for how real it is the first time or the first few times. You get used to it over time. But yes, if done correctly, you should actually see things. But bear in mind that can take weeks or months for some, years for others. And that's normal. That's fine. That's to be expected. There is no right or wrong pace for any individual, and it will happen when it's meant to. If your physical self, body, mind, internal light body, maybe you haven't started building it yet correctly, if that isn't ready to see things yet, it's best to trust that better judgment of your higher self that is still making those subconscious judgment calls on your behalf. Better for it to take months for you to actually see anything than for you to have a sudden breakthrough you're not prepared for. And then, quite literally, to think that you've gone insane. Because that does happen. It's better to be ready for it than not ready. And have this sort of thing make you doubt, question, or shatter your ability to grasp and collaboratively interpret reality in a useful and unharmful way to yourself. Thinking you've gone nuts isn't fun. I wouldn't suggest it. All things happen as they are meant to, and in their own time. Next question. I think I've got time for one or two more. I think there's a masculine ghost in my house. Okay, that is unfortunate. And I don't know if it's good or bad. What should I do? If it's good, I don't want to hurt it. If it's bad, I don't want it angry. Welcome to the conditioned mindset culturally created for you by Hollywood. First of all, a real clip-art, you can look that word up, aren't something you should be playing around with if that is what this is that you're describing. I'm just going to take you at your word. Chances are, given the way you're asking about it, that you don't know what you're dealing with at all. But if it is a clipbot, whether or not you think it's good or bad doesn't matter in the slightest. And you can't hurt it. Banishing something doesn't hurt it. It's good to keep that in mind. A banishing removes presence, entity, pesky thoughts inside your own mind from your own environment. It removes the ability for interaction. That doesn't hurt or help anything. It just makes it go away. Like when a guest leaves your house, someone walks out your front door. That doesn't hurt or help them. You don't hurt or help a visitor when they take their leave after a visit. They simply leave the space you were both sharing and go back to their own, somewhere else, maybe their own house, their own car, whatever. Whether you think you parted on good terms or not, that's a holdover of your emotional state and energies and vibrations, and it's a matter of your perspective, and it's neither here nor there in terms of someone or something else's leaving that space. So, Clipot. Qliphoth. Again, go ahead and Google the spelling if you want to look into it for yourself a little bit. There are other spellings. Qlippot. Clipot. That's pretty much how it's said from the Hebrew if you're in Israel. It's just an empty husk. And that is what most people are referring to when they think they're engaging with energetic patterns that they perceive as ghosts. A clipbot is like when a snake sheds its skin. Does that shed skin still sort of resemble the snake? Sure. Does it sort of move around like the snake if you were to pick it up off the ground and wiggle it? If you're feeding it energy, right? If you're giving it movement by focusing energy into it while your hands are playing with it, sure. Does that make that dead snake skin that's left behind long ago, does that make it the snake? No, right? The snake left. This is just a shell. It's a husk. It's the skin left behind. It may have some vague memory form of what the snake was embedded into its tissue thin matrix, but it isn't the snake. And it itself has no real personality, no form to itself. Without the existence of the snake in the past, it wouldn't exist now as a cast-off part of what was no longer needed. It's a shed-off bit that hasn't quite dissolved, eroded back into the energy surrounding it yet, into the all yet. It once protected the snake an extra bit, like a rind on a fruit protects the sweet golden internal fruit. But the snake grew past its need of that shed skin. The peel of the fruit was removed and left behind so that the seeds within could burst forth and evolve. Okay, I'm mixing metaphors, but you can maybe grasp what I'm saying here. Is there some connotation to what was once held within that husk? Yes. Does it have anything to do with what was once in there in itself? No, not at all. The real question is, why are you paying so much attention to it? If it's just a bit of dust, because that's what it is. It's a scrap of orange rind tossed aside to rot as it's meant to. That's part of its process. If you stop feeding it energy, stop focusing on it, drop it, leave it in the dirt to begin with, don't stop and pick it up, it'll stop doing much of anything. It can't on its own. An errant wind might move it around a little bit if it's a dried snake skin, but it's not going to turn into a snake and start taking actions. Banish it and forget about it. If there's ever a doubt or a question in your mind, banish it and forget it. It wasn't really there to begin with. The only reason you even need to banish it is because you stopped and noticed. You bent over and picked it up to mess with in the first place. If you hadn't noticed it, it wouldn't have had access to your resonant sphere. It wouldn't. And whether or not you think it's good or bad, that doesn't matter. If it's good, it won't mind you saying, take a vacay for a while, friend. I'll get back to you when and if I want to. It will have no problem with that. And if it's bad, you should be banishing it anyway because you don't want it slowing you down. You don't need it slowing down your process. You don't need it interfering with you. Now, if you did pay attention to it, and now it has access to your sphere, your resonance, you're on the same vibratory plane as it. Because you inadvertently made the mistake of vibrating at the same low harmonic rate, actively seeking, by your own choices and actions, whether or not you knew it, to become involved with it, where it became an existent property in your perceptions, environs, what have you. Fine. Okay, that happened. So, banish it. Move on entirely, and for the love of Astra, for the love of the stars, look to raising your vibration. Do you really want to be down there in the dirt, playing around in the muck with a dead snake skin? No. And the very idea that you or anyone can or should help a ghost or clipbot, however you want to define this, or just another individual, an actual living individual who may be good or bad in your estimation or not, all of that reeks of arrogance, egoic, dominating arrogance. You know it does. Stop and think about it for a minute. When you're sad, when you're working through something, whose choice is it to cease being sad? It's yours and yours alone. No one can or does have the right or ability to have control over you. When you're angry, can other people stop that? In fact, even if they actively try to stop that, what does that usually do to someone? It makes them angrier. Who's responsible for your happiness, your sadness, your anger, your growth, your evolution? No matter how good or bad you think any one of those specific emotions or behavior patterns is. No matter how much others may or may not want to help you or involve themselves with it, who's responsible in the end for you? You are. Acknowledge that and allow all other entities the same grace. You can't deny it to them anyway. It's a pesky illusion that you think you can or should, that it's somehow your responsibility or right. Now, that doesn't mean you have to ignore any entity, animal, a ghost, higher entity, lower entity, daemon, another human individual. You don't have to ignore someone who's in pain. You can hold space for them. If it doesn't energetically drain you, if you have the training, resources, energy for that, you can choose to stand in silent support and companionship while another goes through things and willfully chooses to share those experiences, that data stream of what they're experiencing with you. If you also make that choice to watch those experiences, to watch them go through that and allow it to inform your own experience. That you can do. It may be a comfort to them. It may help you learn things. It may not. But you can, if you choose to, hold the light, anchor the light, if you will, and allow that for someone else or something else to be there with them. But don't fool yourself. The expectation that what you're doing will help someone or something else, that expectation you have that you can force an effectualized outcome or that you can subvert another's will, which is another way of looking at the same thing, however well-seeming those intentions may seem to be to you, to change how someone else is feeling, acting, or behaving because you want it or think it's for the best. That's hubris. It's ridiculous. You can't, and frankly, you should never want to. None of that is what Magick's about. It isn't your place to help a ghost, for instance, like in your question, or even think that it's capable of experiential comprehension the way you are. That right there is arrogant. What you're doing is you're projecting onto something else the way your own perspective and dimension works. So any more than it's your job to force someone who just suffered a tragedy to cheer up and go partying with you. It seems horrible. Who would do that, right? With no respect to that person's story. Where someone just buried their mother 20 minutes ago and you're like, cheer up, let's go drink. No, that's not okay. However ridiculous or unnecessary someone's grief, for instance, may seem to you, that isn't your choice. It's not up to you. We each have our own path, and we are each learning the lessons we need to learn. And, closing side note, playing with necromancy, thinking about it, focusing on it, clipbots, ghosts, spirit boxes, whatever, it's just gross. You won't find it in genuine initiated circles of the higher craft. You just won't. It's like playing with your own poo. It's foul. It's a sideshow to what you can do with your own power. It's meant to distract and entertain the weakest of minds. That's who usually falls into, finding some sort of inspiration in that nonsense, and usually with disastrous consequences, because any magi who focuses on clipbot, no matter how experienced, for any purpose, anyone who opens themselves up to that on purpose is also opening themselves up to all sorts of low vibratory phenomenon and trouble. It's like poking a bear and then complaining when it claws at you and you get injured. What were you doing in the bear's cave to begin with? What were you doing crawling around in the dirt? Come back out into the sunlight. It's much nicer. And you can't get anything. You won't learn anything. You can't improve from nonsense like talking to ghosts. However you go about it, there's nothing there to learn. They don't have anything to tell you. You aren't meant to get anything from it. It isn't your plane of current existent being, and it severely mucks up your energy stream. What are you wasting your time and abilities with? That's the question I always have for people who get lost in this sort of thing. There are far more powerful, informed, ascendant entities and forces worth talking to. You need so many lifetimes. Right? Why do we keep coming back here? There are so many worth interacting with. Do yourself a favor. Seek those out. Far more useful. I'll get back to some more questions next time because this podcast ran a little long on me. Until next time.